I mean, this is the firebombing of Tokyo. The whole place went up in flames. In fact, it got so hot, the canals boiled. It's an operational solution. It's unconditional surrender after a protracted war of annihilation that destroys just about every single Japanese city, minus a couple that survived. What broke the stalemate? And here's what happened. It's 3 really bad things that happened in 4 days. Talk about a concentration of really bad events from a Japanese point of view happening all at once. When you want to talk about, this is the psychological shattering that actually happens to the Japanese. First, the United States drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 2 days later, the Russians pour 1.5 million people into Manchuria, the nightmare scenario of the Japanese army. And they know if this war protracts, the Russians are going to come down through Manchuria, down the Korean Peninsula, onto Hokkaido, and down the home islands. It'll yield a divided Japan if it goes on for a long time. And then you have the next day, the United States drops the second atomic bomb with a bluff. The idea being, we're going to keep doing this daily or every other day, except we don't have any more atomic bombs, and we cannot build them quickly for a long time. So that's big bluff. But the emperor then has had enough, and he breaks the deadlock in the cabinet, and the cabinet allows the deadlock to be broken the next day. And then he makes an unprecedented radio broadcast, never had that happen before, to his subjects, telling them, game over. And then the next day, he sends 3 imperial princes to the Manchurian, Chinese, and Southern theaters, conveying his orders at game over. And from that moment on, his samurai obeyed him, and they absolutely cooperated with the occupation. There's no insurgency, no nothing going on after this. And at the end of the war, the United States came to understand the Japanese. At the beginning, totally misread the situation with the oil embargo that's meant to deter. Instead, it precipitates the war that we didn't want. But at the end of the war, the United States realizes you're going to need some level of Japanese cooperation if you're going to occupy the place. And they're going to use Emperor Hirohito for this. Hirohito is scared to death that it's not so much that he'll be hanged, but that the United States will extinguish his dynasty, kill him and his son, and then that it's over. And so he's willing to sign any piece of paper that MacArthur puts under his pen. And one of those is the Constitution of Japan, that is going to change their civil and military institutions, demilitarize the place, and try to get a democracy going there. The Constitution was written in 1 week by MacArthur's staff. They're running around raiding bombed out libraries for examples of Western constitutions, and they cobble this thing together. And this is the unamended Constitution of Japan, still in power, as in effect to this very day, MacArthur's gift to Japan. All right, I've been incredibly critical of the Japanese, but to sum up here, there are cultural explanations for their neglect of grand strategy, inability to cut their losses, inability to coordinate, and the ferocity with which they fought. So if you look at their values, and they're explanatory of what may well happen when things get set off. But I've been really critical of Japan. I want to even out the story by ending on the United States a little bit, because the United States played a good game or a bad game of half-court tennis and mirror imaged at the beginning of this war. So when the Japanese go into Manchuria in 1931, we want them out. We don't ask, well, why are you doing this? And their answer would be, well, hey, you passed the Hawley Smoot tariff. That means we're trade dependent. Whom am we going to trade with? And once you did the tariff, everyone retaliated. So you've now shut down international trade. So we need an empire that's big enough to survive. So that's why we're in Manchuria. And by the way, there are way too many communists here, and we got to get rid of those. And then in 1937, when they up the ante, going into the rest of China, we didn't inquire what's going on. And what the Japanese want to do is wall off communism, don't want that. And then they want to stabilize China so that you can have some productive economic growth. And if you go, well, what were U.S. post-war objectives for China? Ooh, sounds remarkably familiar. Communists out, stabilize the place. Okay. Well, how does the war affect all this? Well, actually, the warfare that went on wiped out the 2 barriers to communist expansion in Asia. What are the barriers? Well, one It's Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists in China. The Japanese wipe him out. They don't totally defeat him, but they have so weakened him and so discredited him, but by the end of the World War II, he is really poorly positioned to win the Chinese Civil War, which he promptly loses. And then what does the United States do? What's the other barrier to communism? Well, it's the Japanese. We wipe them out. So what do you get? A unified communist China, which makes really complicated wars in the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And the problem is the gift that keeps on giving. We're still dealing with this problem today.